good afternoon or morning to all of you, depending on which time zone you happen to be in. It's great to gather with you again virtually. And since this is the end of the year, what we thought we'd do is review all the activities of Together for Choice in 2020, talk about our plans for 2021, and then answer questions that you folks have. A number of you have submitted questions in advance, and so we'll go through those and then take any further questions that you wish to lodge in the chat portion if you wish. So in terms of 2020, as everybody knows, it was quite an unusual and unexpected year. You know, we started the year planning to focus, as we have, on making sure that the settings rule is properly implemented, influencing CMS to interpret the rule in a way that is less restrictive, protect our rights under 14C, to protect employment of our family members, and preserve vocational options. But pretty quickly, 2020 threw a curveball. The pandemic hit, and we needed to really pivot our focus to issues related to the pandemic and how to best help our loved ones, especially those living in either group homes or more congregate settings, get through this crisis. And so what we did is it became pretty clear after talking to our provider members that what was really critical was that Medicaid needed to increase its payments to the states, who could then increase their payments to providers to meet all the increased pandemic-related costs, PPE, additional personnel, et cetera, and also payments that would hopefully allow day programs that were shut down to survive the pandemic so that they'd still be there when the pandemic ends. And so what we did is we prepared a memorandum back in April outlining the challenges that our providers faced in caring for our loved ones and the increased funding that was necessary. And Ashley did a great job circulating that memo far and wide to virtually the entire House of Representatives and the entire Senate. And then she went out and started setting up phone calls for us to have, Zoom calls primarily, with all the offices that were willing to talk to us. And Ashley was very persistent, not accepting no for an answer. And over the course of April, May, and June, we talked to, I would guess, probably roughly close to half of the House and Senate, both sides of the aisle. And we were able to explain to them again the importance of getting greater Medicaid funding to the states, who could then provide that increased funding to our providers. As you know, there were some COVID relief packages passed by Congress back in March. They did have some provisions in there that provided some assistance, but it was not enough, and it was not very effective. And so our focus was on what we hoped would be a next COVID relief package. The House passed one in May, and we were hoping the Senate would take that up and we could have some influence on what the final bill looked like. Well, here we are in December, and there still has been no additional COVID relief package. They're still working on one. It's not going to include any of the provisions that not only we have advocated for, but all the other disability groups have advocated for. So that is very disappointing. But we were successful in the sense that we were able to talk to a large number of members of Congress and their offices and explain who we are, what we stand for, and what the needs of our folks were. And so we certainly got our name out there and our recognition out there. And I think that's going to reap some real benefits down the road. It's hard to find a silver lining with this pandemic, but I guess the one that we can identify for Together for Choice is that it did really level the playing field in a sense, because nobody was meeting in person in DC. Everybody who was seeking to lobby their Congress folks were meeting virtually. And so we were able to do the same. The congressional offices were generous with their time. And so in that sense, I think, as I said, really leveled the playing field and got us to really play on the same field as a lot of the other disability, the much larger and better funded disability advocacy groups. One of the other major things we did, as you might recall, back toward the end of May, the Biden campaign issued its disability policy, which had some things in there that concerned us. Again, that the focus of a portion of that policy was to emphasize community residential settings and to shift folks from so-called institutional settings to community settings. It also advocated getting rid of 14C. It advocated revising guardianship rules. All of those things were very concerning to us. And so we wrote the Biden campaign a lengthy letter outlining those concerns. We have not gotten a response to that letter, but we are still continuing to try to influence that campaign. Now a successful campaign, obviously it's going to be the next administration. And we're going to continue our efforts. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about 2021. One of the other major initiatives that we continued this past year was working with some researchers at the University of Minnesota who are working on a set of quality metrics. Now, these quality metrics are intended to be focused on waiver settings. And the reason for that is that's what the funding for this particular project requires. But we're working closely with them to make sure that those metrics are appropriate for all levels of folks with disabilities, including the most significantly disabled, and hopefully metrics that ultimately can be used beyond waiver settings, used in ICFs as well, and being really an appropriate measure for measuring the quality of services being provided, and potentially provide a vehicle, which we've been looking for, that could truly and accurately measure outcomes and quality at ICFs versus community settings. So, and at more congregate, even waiver settings, such as farmsteads and disability-specific settings, so that we can say, look, if you look at these measures, these are appropriate measures. If you look at them, they show that you don't necessarily have better outcomes and better quality just because you're in a small waiver setting, a small so-called community setting versus a more congregate setting. So that's the goal. We're continuing to work on that. And I know those of you that joined our member call with the researchers a few weeks ago heard what they're working on, heard that they're looking for providers all over the country to team up with to just test out the measures, not actually implement the quality survey at this point, but just test the measures and make sure they're appropriate measures. And we encourage any provider who's interested to contact us, and we will connect you with the folks at the University of Minnesota to help participate in this project, which again, at this point is just to make sure that the measures are really measuring what we want them to measure. And the other thing we've done beyond in 2020, beyond just working at the federal level, as I've outlined, is we've been very active in the states. We've had a number of families and a number of providers who have contacted us to seek our help with their state legislators or state regulators. So we've been active, just to give you an example, in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Alabama, Michigan, Oklahoma, California, Arizona, Tennessee, and Texas. And again, this is almost exclusively Ashley's work. She works tirelessly on this stuff and has done a great job. And so, one of the things we'd want you to keep in mind is if you have an issue that you think we can be of help, obviously we're here. Now, I would caution you on a couple of things. One is Ashley is our only paid employee, and she's part-time. So we have very limited capacity. The other thing is we're only going to take on projects that are consistent with our mission and where we feel we have the expertise where we can actually add value to what you're trying to accomplish. So all that is by way of saying you may contact us and say, hey, can we help you with this? And we may have to say no. Reluctantly, but it may be because we just don't have the bandwidth, or because it's not consistent with our mission, or we just simply don't have the expertise to provide the help you're looking for. We will, in those instances, try to point you in the right direction and get you the help you need, but we may not be able to take it on. But again, just remember, we are here. If you've got issues relating to expanding options for residential vacational settings in your state, and your state's giving you problems, we will do very much want to try to help you with that. As you know, as I mentioned before, we have throughout the year provided specific programming that we hope is you found informative. We had 2 sessions with Melissa Harris at CMS to talk about what's going on at that agency. And she talked a lot about the settings rule, of course, talked a bit about pandemic-related activities and the vaccine. And we had the programming, as I mentioned, with the researchers from the University of Minnesota. And our goal for 2021 is to continue that type of programming for our members. Ashley also produced a series of videos that highlight the stories of some of our members in a way that, again, explains our mission in real, practical terms. Folks who have struggled because there are limited options for residential services. Folks that have struggled because of the drive to eliminate 14C and sheltered workshops. And if you have not already done so, I invite you to go to our website, look at those videos. The purpose of those, again, since we can't meet face-to-face with state or federal regulators at this point, is these are going to be used and have been used as advocacy pieces, so that they're not just hearing from a lawyer like me or an employee like Ashley, an executive like Ashley. They're hearing from real live folks who are struggling with these issues on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to continue as we find good stories to create more videos for that purpose. So again, if you think you've got a story to tell, you'd like to help us do that, I would invite you to contact us, and we can together figure out whether that's something that's worthwhile making a short video of. So let me now pivot to, I think that covers pretty much what we've done in 2021. I'll pause for just a minute. Ashley, have I missed anything do you think we ought to throw in there?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything.
Great. So let's talk about 2021. Obviously, what's really top of mind as far as we're concerned is we have a new administration coming in. And so there's going to be brand new folks at HHS, at CMS, at HUD, at Labor. And we're tracking that very closely in terms of who Biden is selecting for these various positions that are so important to us. And we're looking to identify people who can give us entree to these people so that we can, at the appropriate time, early in 2021, start reaching out to them, setting up virtual meetings with them or their staff, because we know that our other disability advocacy groups who take positions different from us are doing the very same thing. We need to make sure our voice is heard. We need to make sure that we have a seat at the table. And that's, probably our number one objective for at least the first 6 months of 2021 is to make sure that happens. Obviously, in terms of what we can expect from the federal government, the outcome of the Senate races in Georgia are very important, which obviously most of us don't have any control over since we're not in Georgia. But if the Democrats win both those seats, and therefore with Vice President Harris providing the tie-breaking vote in the Senate, the Democrats will control the Senate, and that will have an impact on what legislation we might expect out of the administration. If the Democrats don't win both seats, if it's split 1-1 or the Republicans win both, then the Republicans will control the Senate. And I think it's unlikely that we're going to see any significant legislation that will get past the House and the Senate and signed by the president. But obviously, we'd be watching that very, very closely. We're going to continue our advocacy at the state level, just as we did in 2020, and want to make sure that states are properly interpreting the settings rule, that they are protecting the ICF option, which is extremely important to our members, and that we're preserving 14C. I think we all anticipate that our other advocacy groups that are very focused on the community and very focused on trying to get rid of so-called institutional settings are going to use the pandemic, as they have already, as an excuse to drive their agenda, claiming that more congregate settings are much more harmful for folks because of the spread of the pandemic. Spread of the virus. And we're going to need to be very vigilant about that and push back on that because the data just doesn't support that. There have been a lot of virus cases in smaller settings as well as larger ones. So again, it's not the size that makes the difference. It has a lot to do with what's going on in the community around the setting. And of course, the quality of the setting and the infection controls that are used and all that. But, because of how infectious this disease is, even one's best efforts can't completely control the spread of the virus. And it really has a lot more to do with the spread of the virus in the community, because of course, whether you're small or big, you're relying on staff to come in to the home and provide direct care services to the individual. And that's where the infection, unfortunately, arises. But we're going to need to be very vigilant to push back on any attempt to use the pandemic as another excuse to get rid of larger, more congregate settings. We're going to continue to provide programming that we hope you'll find of interest. And then again, in that regard, if you've got ideas on subjects you'd like to have us try to cover in our member calls or on special presentations, please email us and let us know. And we'll try to pull that sort of stuff together. And again, we're hoping to continue, as I mentioned, to create videos of compelling stories people's real life struggles as they try to find appropriate housing options and vocational options for their family member. And so we're going to continue to try to identify those and create some really good and compelling videos. That's all I had in terms of what we have done in 2020, what we're planning to do in 2021. And so we can now turn to some of the questions you've submitted. And again, if you've got more questions, please put them in the chat. And before we go on to questions, again, I just want to thank all of you, our members, for all of your support. We wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without your support. And we really hope you continue to support us going into 2021. So Ashley, do you want to maybe read the questions and we can try to answer some of them?
Yes. Some of the questions I'm going to have to paraphrase because that we want to be applicable to everyone joining this call. So the first question is, according to Northern Lakes Community Mental Health, which I believe is in Michigan, community inclusion activities need to take place at properties not affiliated with the provider organization and to which the public at large is invited. Please clarify this, as our clients prefer to attend activities with their friends, and we create activities just for them, like sewing classes and music, drum, hands-on experiences.
Yeah, this is a very good and important question. It is an unfortunate fact that when CMS issued its settings rule, and in the commentary it issued along with that rule, it does say that it does not count as a community activity having the community come to your facility or your campus or your home. They really focus on individuals with disabilities getting out into what they call the community. It's been a bone of contention of ours. We've addressed it to CMS. I don't think that's going to change, but what I would say is that doesn't mean you can't have the sewing classes and the other things that your folks enjoy. It's just you need to try to have a mixture of those things, so that you have some things that are exclusively perhaps for your folks. Perhaps you have some things at your setting where you invite the community in. And then you also have things where folks get away from their setting and into the neighborhoods around the setting. I think if you can have a combination of those things, I think, and you can show that what you're doing is really what the individuals who you serve want you to do for them and with them, I think you'll be in pretty good stead as far as the settings rule is concerned. Now, again, remember that states do have leeway to impose more strict requirements than are in the settings rule. We try to convince states not to do that, but some states do that. And then, we have to work on changing that. But if that's what they decide to do, we have to try to comply with whatever those new requirements are.
Yeah, second question, for folks living in their own apartment and their caregivers receiving supported living services, so they're not living in licensed care homes, but they live in an apartment building or their own private home and receive supported living services from caregivers, can they have some priority in terms of for COVID vaccination, just like licensed care homes?
Yeah, that's not a question that I can answer definitively. As you know, the federal government, the CDC in particular, has issued some guidelines on priorities for the vaccination. But those are just guidelines. States are free to set their own priorities, and states are varying their priorities. So what I would suggest that you do is you need to contact your state health department and see where that's where those folks are slotted, and make your pitch for the importance of having them high up in the priority list. And sometimes it's even the states are in some cases leaving it to individual counties within the state to set priorities within some broader guidelines. So it's important to identify in your particular state who are the decision makers, and then to contact those folks to find out where you are on the list or where your loved one is on that set of priorities, and to see if you can prevail upon them to move your loved one up on the list if that's something that you want to have happen.
Yeah, that's yeah. Okay. Any congressman contacted? Have we contacted any congressmen to carve out the 14C phase out from Raise the Wage Act and Transformation to Competitive Employment Act, and any plan of action?
Yes, as I mentioned, we've had a lot of contact with members of Congress on that issue, and a lot of it came when the House of Representatives, was considering the Raise the Wage Act back in the summer of 2019. And if you recall, we got a representative here in suburban Chicago to sponsor an amendment to the Raise the Wage Act, which would have carved out folks with significant intellectual disabilities from the elimination of 14C. And he actually introduced that in Congress. The Rules Committee at that time in the House said we want to proceed with a clean Raise the Wage Act and did not permit any amendments. That passed the House. It never was taken up by the Senate, Republican-controlled Senate, but we did have conversations with many members on both in the House and the Senate with our concerns, and shared with them our draft provision, which was a carve out for our folks. Now, again, as I said, that bill went nowhere because the Senate was not going to take it up, and there was no activity on the bill during 2020. It remains to be seen whether there'll be activity on it in 2021, and as I alluded to, that could turn a lot on the outcome of the Georgia Senate races. However, even if the Georgia Senate races go Democratic and Democrats control the Senate, it'll still be a 50-50 Senate. You still have the filibuster rule in the Senate. I don't think the Democrats have the votes to change the filibuster rule, because I think there are some conservative Democrats who don't want to see the filibuster rule go away. So my prognostication is that we're not going to see action on the Raise the Wage Act in 2021. I could be wrong, but that's my best guess, and we'll certainly keep a very close watch on that. I think the action on 14C issues are going to be in the individual states. And so we need to really keep an eye on individual states seeking to raise the wage and eliminate 14C. Some are raising the minimum wage and not touching 14C, which is great. But for those who are considering getting rid of 14C, again, the language we've put together to carve out from the elimination of 14C folks with significant intellectual disabilities can be used in the individual states as well. So if you think your state's heading in that direction and you'd like to see the language we've put together, we can certainly get that to you, and we can help you strategize on how to work with the legislators in your state to try to make that happen.
What is the future of intentional communities under the new Biden administration and Congress? Is there anything we can do to help?
Again, great and interesting question. as I mentioned to you, certainly the Biden disability policy does take the position that they want to move folks out of so-called institutions into community settings. They don't really define what those necessarily are. But how, so I think you have, and we know that the disabilities committee that the campaign formed is made up principally of the usual suspects who are very much committed to small neighborhood housing and not having congregate settings of any sort. So, we are going to have to really work hard and approach the new folks at CMS to let them know our position and make it clear to them that the voices they have been hearing from don't speak for us, and they don't speak for a large segment of the disabilities community. Again, I don't see legislation passing in this Congress on that. I don't think they're going to pass the Disabilities Integration Act, but I could be wrong about that, and we're going to keep a very close eye on it. And we're going to make sure that the new policymakers and members of Congress are very much aware of our position.
Okay. So in a state that has already disallowed sub-minimum wage, what would it take and what help could be gotten to reverse that decision?
So that's going to depend on what form that disallowance took. If it was legislation passed by the state, then what we need to do is introduce new legislation that would amend that legislation and reinstate a 14C type provision for that state. So that obviously involves finding one or more legislators who are your friend, who agree with us on that issue, and work with them to get that legislation introduced and passed. If, on the other hand, 14C was eliminated in the state through some administrative action by one of the state administrative agencies, then the approach would be to go to that agency and say, we think that policy, that change in policy was wrong. Here's why. And we want you to revert back to permitting 14C wages in the state through a change in your administrative policy. And again, so that involves identifying the agency involved and finding the right folks to approach. Now, on both of those, whether it's a legislative action or administrative action, yes, we can help you with that. We can help you strategize on how to do it and help you, organize folks within your state to make the approach that's needed. So we're here to help you with that. We can do that. It's going to require a lot of work on your part. It's not going to be, here, TFC, you do this whole thing. They don't want to hear from us. I'm from Chicago. I won't carry any weight in any other state. Ashley's from California. She's not going to carry weight in Nebraska. So it really takes organization at the local level and getting a significant group of people together so they know there's power behind what you're talking about to then approach either the legislature or the administrative agency, whichever the case may be.
How can we develop a workforce of direct support providers to serve adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities living in apartments in the larger community? We are supporting our daughter with autism in an apartment near our home, but we're aging and there are no organized services to provide support.
Yeah, this is a very, very difficult issue and one that comes up everywhere. I don't have a great answer for you. I know just from hearing some stories here in Illinois that, where there is a family or families that sort of operate their own home and have to hire their own DSPs. Often what happens is they try to hook up with a provider agency who will sort of take over the home and provide the employees and that sort of thing. So, I would encourage you to think about that. Is there a provider agency in your area that you could approach to say, hey, we'll pay you, but will you take over operation of this home, provide the employees and all that? Beyond that, I'm afraid I don't have any good solutions for you. It's a very difficult problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at who was asking this question, because it all really depends on each state too, and each county, because they all have different funding options available for service coordination as well. For California, starting June of 2021, we are going to be able to access self-determination program where families can select or self-direct services more easily. So I believe that many other states are going in that direction. So we will closely monitor that, and we'll share more information as we go along. But you might also look into a fiduciary in your area. That area is growing as well for those that might be able to become, your loved one's guardian in case you're not available. That might be another option, but that also requires, private pay option from your own pocket. So that might not be a feasible option for your family, but it all depends on each family. So if you would like to discuss more, please just reach out to me. If Together for Choice is not planning a DC office, which our most frequent opposition have offices there, how many days on the Hill are planned for 2021?
Yeah, I think 2021 is still going to be a year that is dominated by the pandemic, in the sense that I do not see a resumption of in-person meetings on the Hill, certainly before the fall. It may well be that by the fall, with the widespread availability of the vaccine, that people will again feel comfortable traveling and gathering in significant numbers and having meetings in person and that sort of thing. So at the present, we intend to do our legislative work and our regulatory work virtually, as we have through most of 2020, continue that into well into 2021, and then just see how conditions change over the course of the year.
Okay. What can be done to weed out and hold accountable dishonest persons in the disability system?
I guess I don't know exactly what the questioner means by dishonest. I guess there's a couple different levels of dishonesty. If what we're talking about are folks who are committing criminal conduct, then you go to the law enforcement authorities and you say, hey, we think this person's doing something that's unlawful, embezzling money or whatever it is they're doing, and let them do what they do. If we're talking about dishonesty in the sense of some government official saying to, oh yes, I support your position, or I'm very sympathetic or whatever, and then they turn around and do something totally opposite to what you've talked about, that's something obviously you need to call them out on. And sometimes it pays to get local press involved if it's serious enough and if it's something that would appeal to them. But mainly you deal with folks like that sort of dishonesty, with just not giving it a pass and trying to get a whole bunch of folks organized to support our position, to continue to meet with them and meet with others, go around that person or above that person if you need to. And again, as I said, if push comes to shove and it's a really serious issue, it helps a lot to get the local press involved.
Is the incoming administration open to the idea that not everyone is capable of competitive employment, and can live independently with supports or make medical and financial decisions for themselves, no matter how much support they're offered.
Those are 2 points, 2 of the 3 points that we made in our letter to the Biden campaign back in the spring. Those are points we're going to continue to push with this new administration. I can't tell you right now how open they are to it, but we will find out.
Okay. I think this may be kind of a same question that was asked before. Or was addressed before. Any strategy to bring organizations together to fight the phase out of 14C?
Yeah, it's a slightly different question, I guess, Ashley. I know people have asked, gee, TFC, aren't there other groups you can associate with and bring more power to our position? And especially on 14C, absolutely, and we have been. We work with Access. We work with VOR. We work with National Council for Severe Autism. Those are the 3 primary groups who I think, by and large, we're very much in line with on a lot of issues, but in particular on 14C. And so, yes, we do work with them. We make all of them aware of what we're doing, ask them to join in. We look for them to do the same with us. And yeah, there's definitely power in numbers, and we're very conscious of trying to bring any sympathetic groups along with us to join us in our advocacy.
Okay. Is there any way to get medical carve-out legislation for ICFs to protect them from settings rules?
Well, first of all, the settings rule does not apply to ICFs. So you don't need a medical carve-out for somebody living in an ICF. The settings rule only applies to what we call waiver settings, home and community-based settings. And if you look at the settings rule, it says in particular that an ICF is not a home and community-based setting. So ICFs have a separate stream of Medicaid funding, wholly separate from what funds home and community-based settings, and are subject to a whole set of different rules. And the settings rule is not among the rules that apply to ICFs. Now, so let's change the question a little bit. Let's assume there is somebody living in a home and community-based setting and therefore is subject to the settings rule. There are provisions in the settings rule that where a person can be carved out from those portions of the rule if you can show it's medically necessary for them to be carved out. And if you need any more detail on that, contact us and we can fill you in. But yes, there is a way for somebody who's living in an HCBS setting to be carved out from things like having whatever food available to them 24 hours a day that they want. If you can show that medically that's inappropriate for them, they can be carved out from that rule. That's just one example.
Okay. Does the Biden administration have a policy about congregate residential settings and work site with job coaches where they pay sub-minimum wage?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a couple of times already. Yeah. Certainly the disability policy that was issued by the Biden campaign shows a bias toward small community settings and anti so-called institutions. It's not, the policy statement, if you read it, is not all that specific on beyond that, in terms of what settings they favor and what settings they disfavor, beyond those general things I just mentioned. But one of the goals we have is to get in front of the appropriate folks once they're in place and explain the importance of preserving more congregate settings, whether it be an ICF or whether it be a community setting, however, one that is a farmstead, campus setting, or other intentional community, because is a significant segment of our community that does much better in those settings than in the smaller settings that the Biden folks seem to prefer. On 14C, they've been pretty clear. They want to get rid of it. And so again, we're not going to just roll over. We're going to make sure they're aware of our concerns and the concerns of thousands of folks across the country, as was evidenced by the comments that were submitted to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and the Department of Labor in 2 separate occasions where comments were sought. Overwhelmingly, the comments that were submitted supported keeping 14C. And so we're going to make sure that folks are aware of that and aware of the importance of preserving that option and the fact that getting rid of it will actually hurt some of the folks they claim to be trying to help.
Is there any type of mentoring program or assistance for local advocacy in order to build our numbers to make a statement without our legislature that will not be overrun by the so-called advocacy agencies that everyone thinks are the experts?
Yeah, again, part of our mission is to help you in your local areas organize and to approach your government officials. There are materials on our website that provide some assistance in that regard, but we can also further help you. Again, to the extent we have the time and the issues you're concerned with are ones we have expertise in. We are there. We are here to help you get organized and approach your government officials.
Yeah. This question from Cheryl that I kind of don't understand. We need help in Washington with wage. They did eliminate some. No, there's another one that she asked. Any advice on how to deal with the issue that we hear over and over regarding spending funds on ICF takes away from those in the HCBS settings? I don't really understand that question.
Well, let me, I think I may understand it, but so let me address it this way. As I mentioned a few moments ago, there are 2 separate streams of Medicaid funding for folks with disabilities. There is the Medicaid stream that funds ICFs. That's what we call entitlement funding. That was the original Medicaid funding. There's a wholly separate stream for home and community-based settings. So it is not true that funding for ICFs takes money away from community settings. They're totally separate streams of funding. It's only true in the most theoretical sense, and that is there's just one pie. It's got to get divided up. And if you have a bigger piece, I have a smaller piece. I mean, obviously there's some truth to that, but then you could say, well, money spent on some fancy military jet takes money away from community settings because there's just one pie and there's only a limited amount of resources. Now, one of the arguments we face when we're dealing with the home and community-based funding, and we say, look, we think farmsteads, campus settings, intentional communities are community-based settings. They meet the settings rule, and you should recognize that as such, and you should fund those. That's where the advocates say, you're taking money away from true community settings to try to fund your congregate settings. And you should just go over and be an ICF and use those funds. Don't use our funds. Our funds should be used for just these small, really, what we really consider to be community settings. So that's where the argument comes, not from ICFs taking money away, but from the more congregate community settings taking money away from the smaller community settings, because there's just a discrete pie, a discrete slice of the pie to fund community settings. And the advocates want all that money for small homes. in neighborhoods and don't want to see any of it go to more congregate settings. So that's the argument that you hear.
Great. So those of you who have any questions, you can unmute yourself. Comments, questions, suggestions. We have about 10 minutes. So feel free to chat and tell us like how you feel about what we have done for this year and what you would like to see us doing and working on next year.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mickey.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ashley Scott. That was really very well done, but very upsetting. I would just like to make a few comments. I'm from Wilmington, Delaware, and we are working very hard. I just want all of you to know that we have, without going into detail, we are working very, very hard to get above the platform committee to meet with people, Biden people. So we are doing our best 24/7. Another thing going forward, when we talk to the 14C issue, I think we have to now start making sure that we do not refer to them as sheltered workshops. That's the new R word. They are work centers or CRPs. That's the new term. So the minute you say shelter workshops, well, then you're out. But if you say work centers or community rehabilitation programs, then I think we can get a little farther in the conversation. And, as far as all the other things, I agree. The platform for us is not good, but trust me, we are doing everything in our power to get above the ideologues and do our best. And hopefully Together for Choice will be a part of what we're hoping to do. So please, fingers crossed, we can make some headway because it's not very good for us. But thank you all, especially Scott and Ashley, because I've been.
Thank you, Mickey, for all you're trying to do. It's hopefully we'll get breakthrough at some point.
Yeah.
Scott, this is Chris Burbank in Connecticut.
Yes, hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
I just wanted to extend my appreciation. We have been on a journey for the past 18 months, and it was not until we encountered Together for Choice that we found the resources to make the kinds of arguments with CMS and with the state that we are currently making. The information sessions that you guys have scheduled with Melissa and just all the hard work and the heavy lifting that you're doing, it really is making a difference for families like mine. So I just wanted to say thank you very, very much. And we're glad that you are partners in the journey, and we are eager to help support you and all the other members here in the work that you're continuing to do. It's so important.
Great. Thank you, Chris, and really appreciate your support, and obviously are hoping you have the outcome you're looking for.
I think you're close, Chris. All right. So can some providers share your progress with vaccination? Because I've been hearing from other providers that they're in line to get vaccinated in early January or end of December. So I'm very curious to hear from providers what's happening in your neck of the woods on vaccination. Okay, no one's speaking.
Hi, this is Adam from Georgia.
Oh, hi, Adam. Yes.
How you doing?
Annandale Village. Yes.
Yes. We are on the priority list as 1A, and so we should be, although nothing is certain, getting vaccines by the end of the year. So we are doing it through an agreement with Walgreens. And they did not get the initial shipment. Those went to the hospitals and settings affiliated with the hospitals. So they, starting Monday, should have those shipments of vaccine, and then we should fall in fairly quickly, but no one knows for certain, but that's the plan.
That sounds great.
Yay. That's wonderful. So it's gonna take about 2-3 months total, or how's that gonna be rolled out?
For me, so there's
Yes.
Walgreens is saying they have 3 visits to our campus for the first round, and then 21 days later another 3 visits. So each one will have 21 days in between. I'm not sure how those 3 visits will be spaced out yet.
Ashley, this is
Great.
Gina from Misericordia. I just want to say, Adam, it sounds like we're kind of mirroring your process. It's nice to know that the process sounds pretty consistent. A lot of questions. We're trying to kind of work through that, figure out how the heck we're going to get the number of people vaccinated with, those parameters. But stay in touch, Adam, because I would love to hear, once you get it, how it all goes.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Ashley,
Yes.
Joe Ukulis from St. Louis Center in Chelsea, Michigan. And
Hi, Joe.
hi, we just had a general staff meeting today, and our COO, Dina, advised everyone that apparently we're in the Category 1 section also for the state of Michigan, and we may be getting the vaccines by late December, early January, and supposedly the National Guard in Michigan is going to make a trip to our facility and vaccinate everybody in our gymnasium. We don't have a specific date yet, so I can't give you a date, but we will definitely be in the first group after the healthcare providers get their shots, of course. So that's good news for us.
That's wonderful. That's really sounds very hopeful. So hopefully we'll be able to get out of this COVID mess. Hopefully by sometime mid 2021. That's our hope.
Yep.
Is that what all the providers are kind of hoping?
Definitely.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Scott, would you like to
Deborah
have?
from
Yeah.
New Hampshire. Hi, Deborah
Yes,
from
hi.
Farmsteads of New England and New Hampshire. We're going to be, possibly some of our people will get into 1B if they happen to be older or have significant underlying health conditions. Otherwise, we're going to be in Group 2. So it should
okay.
be early in the new year.
Wonderful.
New Hampshire is really focusing on the healthcare providers, first responders, and the elderly.
Yep. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
Scott,
Well,
would you like to have a closing comment?
Yes. Again, we really appreciate, Ashley and I, all of your support during the course of 2020. We're really looking forward to working with all of you in 2021. It should be a very active year with the new administration. And I wish all of you a very healthy and happy holiday and new year, and we'll talk to you on the other side.
Happy holidays, everybody. Stay safe. Bye.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
Thanks, Ashley. You guys are terrific.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.